The more advanced the medicine gets that we use, the longer we are going to live. We are seeing this today, and we've been seeing this for the last 40 years or so. This is only going to increase with AI being introduced into the medical field. Sometimes we're even kept alive artificially. And this is why it's increasingly being asked, should we have the option to deny this? Do we have the option to be killed through assisted dying? Hi, my name's James. I am studying for a Masters in Death, Religion and Culture, and this is James Talks Death. And today we're going to be discussing my initial thoughts on assisted dying. So this video is basically me just recording my attitudes towards assisted dying. I would like to record in the future a video where I've had a bit more time to research the subject, but I'll be completely upfront and honest as to how much I know about it at the moment. Luckily enough, I've not had to experience the choice that's needed to consider when assisted dying comes into play with any of the people that I know and love. But I have had plenty of discussions through my course as well as through my religious background. For example, I've had a meeting with a member of the company Dying with Dignity, who work very closely with Dignitas. I will leave a link to that charity in the description, who will be able to give a lot of information, which I've tried to avoid today, because this is just my initial thoughts from my life experiences, that what my attitude to assisted dying would be. So with that, there's going to be 3 different parts of my attitude that we're going to be looking at. And the first would be to do with the fact that it's to do with dying, which is a permanent change. Even though we are guaranteed to go through this permanent change at some point in our lives, as we are all mortal beings, why would we hasten it? The argument for this seems to be, if someone is in endless pain and they want to end their own suffering, then they should be able to have the option to participate in assisted dying by having someone help them end their own life. This opens up a lot of questions for myself. So do they have to be dying already from what's causing them this pain? How bad does the pain have to be before we should consider it? And I also would argue, well, what about mental pain? What about those who are depressed and they are considering, or they believe that their depression is going to last forever? At that moment, they think it will last forever. So at that moment, it looks incurable, and therefore should they also be considered to the service? And technically, would that not just make it suicide? So my definition of assisted dying compared to that of suicide is that someone is there to assist you, and it's a way where you go through like a company such as Dignitas, as opposed to just ending your own life. I also think that it's quite bold to make such a permanent decision, because that would suggest that we know the answer, that we know that what we've got is 100% incurable, and I don't believe in definite answers. I don't believe in the absolute idea that there's no possible chance, that hope should therefore be abandoned, and therefore we should have the option to end our life. However, there are a few, again, that's conflicting with a couple of ideas that I've got about it. So one of them is that I think actually bringing in, for example, legalizing assisted dying might be a good step to actually go towards the prevention of suicides. I think about this a lot like the idea of legalizing drugs, in that if the government and official sources had a hand in organizing it, we can then mold it in a way that's going to be beneficial to not only the person but everyone as a whole. For example, when you talk about the legalization of drugs, we talk about not only can they get tax from it and things like that, but it's that we can control what's going into them. We can control the method that goes into the service. This will be similar, I think, to if we did include assisted dying. We would have control over how it's done. I've mentioned in a previous video that assisted dying in countries and states, in America for example, they'll have like 50% of the people who sign up to the service actually don't go through with it. It's a chance of like reflection, and we can do it in a way where they can consider other options, for example, and also do it in a way where they're safe and they're not being forced into it by someone, which again is another side of the coin, is if you open up that door for everyone, people might be forced into the decision, and we won't be able to guarantee that that will be something that we can get rid of. It's like with the death penalty, there's going to be cases where it gets wrong. Is it worth getting those few wrong cases to help with most of the right ones, if there is any benefits to that right way. So, for example, to help with prevention, let's say if I wanted to end my own life and I thought I don't want to do it illegally because of the repercussions with my family, therefore I'm going to go to the service, which one takes away the idea of hiding things possibly from your loved one. I think also there would need to be stuff like counselling in place for the person who wants to. Again, depends completely on the reasons that they want it. If it's more mental reasons, such as being in issues with mental health, or whether it's issues to do with the incurable pain that people are going through. But that way, for example, we can also have a list of those who want to participate in assisted dying, essentially almost getting a list of people who want to end their own life, and we know then where to intervene. Again, that might highlight the issue that people are going to be going into the service would have to almost know that people are going to try and prevent it, especially if that's the case. If you, for example, were wanted to use the service, you might think, oh, well, if I go for the official means, someone might try and stop me, and I don't want that to happen. Which again, I think that shows a lack of my own knowledge in how the procedures work. I do think it ultimately comes down to freedom of choice. So the freedom to basically choose what to do with your own life. A lot of what my religious background will be is, a lot of us know about the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. It's the case that that's often interpreted, for example, by St. Augustine, who says that includes yourself. So St. Augustine was very well known for being against women who were just about to be assaulted to take their own life. He was very against that because he said, well, you're now committing a sin, and it was a sin, or considered a sin, to take your own life. I do think that still has its influence, even though people may not directly take inspiration from that. We are inspired by religion and the culture that is itself inspired from it. People will still have that in the back of their minds, even subconsciously. But then when you think of places like America, who are very all for the freedoms to be able to choose what to do with your own life, regardless of the nanny state that we live in England and the UK, should that decision be made for you by having that illegal? And let's be honest, can you police suicide? Because that's essentially what we would need to do, is trying to police this growing, it's the only way to put it, is pandemic. With the cost of living crisis and the impending crisis that's coming, this is going to only get worse. So maybe having that official means is going to come more into conversation. And with freedom of choice, obviously we don't want anyone to die. I don't want anyone to die. But how do I get the right to make that decision for someone else? Like God. Is God able to make that decision with the commandment, thou shalt not kill, and therefore thou shalt not end their own life? Because that would be technically killing yourself. And this is my dilemma. I think it should be an option for people to consider, but I don't think no one should take it. So, for example, again, having the drugs as an option and not taking them. But then having that option, does that breed temptation, if knowing that that's something that you can do, and how if the service becomes too easy to access and people make haste decisions on assisted dying, they can't regret it, they can't come back from that, and everyone has to live with their decision. Like I say, it's an interesting topic. I'm very interested in the topic itself. I'm also interested in how it would affect those with dementia, because I mean, how many of our loved ones have said, oh, if I ever get like that, shoot me? And it's like, well, do they actually mean that if they ever get something like Alzheimer's and dementia, do they want to have their life ended? Because people who tend to have the illness seem to be quite happy, in the sense that if they're unaware that they've got it, what right have we to end what we would consider happy points of their life, even if maybe, depending on how bad the illness gets, what identity they would have had left, and whether or not their opinions would change. I do want to learn more about the subject. I am just recording my initial thoughts from what I've experiences and conversations I've had, and then hopefully when I've done more research later down the line in a year or so, I can reflect to see how I acted or how I thought beforehand, and whether or not my opinion changed. Although I will admit I haven't really taken a side of the fence. I've been kind of stuck in the middle, but then again I think all answers should be, especially when it's this delicate. It's so case by case of whether or not someone should consider it, or even the fact that I'm discussing it is too bold, because me discussing it is suggesting that I would know in that situation what someone should do. And say, I would love to hear your thoughts about it. It's something that I do think would need to be discussed. I think it's going to be discussed more in politics in the next couple of years, especially with the rise of companies such as Dignitas. I am actually going to Switzerland in about 2 weeks, which is what brought a lot of this conversation to mind, because I know that's a prime place, people say, where we would go to get assisted dying. And they did change the wording of it from euthanasia, I think, recently. But say, if you did enjoy the video, please do leave a like. If it's something that I've discussed today is something of interest to you, we're going to have plenty more similar discussions on this channel. And I do want to make a safe space where people can have these discussions without being judged, because the fact that no one talks about them, we're all quite adolescent in the ideas. We're all quite young in the idea of death. And the more we talk about it, the more we grow about it and the better decisions we can make. But with that, I do hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Take care.